And good evening. It's December 26th, 2024. Welcome back to another season, another episode of Sons of the Father. We're continuing our discussions on The Chosen. This is season 4. We're getting towards the end here. Of course, this season was created by Dallas Jenkins. Tonight, we're going to continue exploring with episode 8, Humble. This is just our part 1. Because during this series, my dad, John Wern, my brother, Jim Wern, and I, we're going to talk about things. Y'all get to listen in. So welcome to the Sons of the Father on the Dusty Feet. And of course, before we forget, if you find these kinds of podcasts useful, please click that subscribe button because those reminders, they just help you. But also, if you think these might be useful to others, click that like button because that is how YouTube will share these with more people if they wish. All of our video discussion series, along with other engaging topics that we have, all of them can be found on TheDustyFeet.com. So, Humble, Part 1. And again, we must remember, this is a storyteller's story, not a reaccounting. Okay? All right. I'm going to start off by bringing up a point that, like I say, will probably divide the room. I know Mom and Dad are not a big fan of that phrase from me, but there's a point in the opening scene, right, when they're preparing for the Passover. The king has returned victorious from battle. Mm-hmm. He takes his son. He wants to show him, to teach him about the Passover and its preparation. And in that, he talks about the care and the purpose of the lamb. Yeah? So here it comes. Passover lamb. It's part of the preparation, and it has nothing to do with forgiveness or remission of sin. Please go back, read the Exodus story, and all the instructions given for them for their remembrance as well. Not only the original, but even in the remembrance. Sin atonement has nothing to do with it. We have remembrance of the flight from Egypt. Mm-hmm. So that's important. But we did get a nice little point in that opening scene when, for those that have been following The Chosen from the beginning, we get this little tie to the bridle that we see his mom give Jesus much later in the game. So if you don't recognize that, folks, I suggest you go back, start from the beginning, because I promise you it's well worth it. Okay, now we can move on. Or talk about that, because that's a fair point. We say this all the time. That is our one of our go-to statements, and we're perpetuating something that truthfully is not in the story. So we're adding, created, have done something, but that's not in the story. That the Passover lamb takes away the sins of and it doesn't. So there's more to ponder there, probably on another episode, probably another time. However, that's just parts of this, but we'll start there. So, okay, now that I've stirred the nest.
A couple of things. One, I hope everybody had a happy Christmas.
There you go. So
because, I know that one of my sons doesn't celebrate Christmas, but the thing that I got out of the Passover lamb was it was a picture of what Mary did to Jesus, where she was putting the oil on his feet. I kind of got that out of it. And I thought that was interesting because Dallas always has something in the beginning I said always, no, I'm saying usually, it usually ties in to something later in the story. And I thought that was interesting. And this episode, it might be called Humble, but I didn't get humble out of it. It is loaded with preparation. All this preparation that Jesus and the Sanhedrin and everybody is preparing for the death They think it's going to be a surprise. Well, their big surprise is it's no surprise to him. So they're both working on the same thing, which I thought was, it's not funny, but it is, when you compare the two, because they're all sneaky and trying to let the other ones know what's going to happen, and all this. Boy, we're going to really throw a fooler in on him, and here he is, preparing the same way, but himself, getting himself ready, and again trying to talk with his guys about it, and they're not. I can't remember who says it in there. Oh, it's Lazarus says, "Did he say burial?" And because he's catching this thing because Jesus is talking about. He knows what's going to happen. So I'm really enjoying. I say that every time, but I'm still enjoying it, and I've seen it now at least twice, no, 3 times. It's quite good. Jim.
It's a power-packed episode, that's for sure. There's a lot in it. We haven't even talked about whether this is going to be a 2-parter or 3-parter for us. But I enjoyed it. Bob, to your point, with regard to the Passover lamb, absolutely. There was nothing in the original description and explanation of what they were to do with the Passover lamb. I'm curious, and I don't know, I've never researched it. At the time of David, time has passed since the original Passover feast. And is it possible that some of their traditions could have evolved because of the introduction of the sacrifices and what those sacrifices in the tabernacle then to the temple mean? And maybe they, melded the two as a possibility. I have no idea.
That's a good question. There is an atonement day. There is a deal for that. There's no lambs involved. There's goats. There's bulls. Goats. There's a bull. There is sacrifice. And there's a bit of priestly preparation that goes with that. But that's not the Passover lamb. The Passover lamb, and this is one of those feasts that God says, and it perpetuates. So I'm not, and those feasts, don't forget those sacrifices, those things started when they went into the land, right? There was a bunch of this, when you get into the land, when you get into the land, when you get into the land, right? So in the land, so those years before David, the sacrifices for all kinds of reasons, from having kids to praising God, to you wronged your neighbor, to all kinds of things that are there for that, then that goes on. The sin atonement, there is a day for that. I think that we in our churchianity side of things have, I agree with your statement with something that's been melded or blurred. I think that's even past that point. I think we overlay something backwards. I think we have a mindset that we overlay that backwards on the story and do that rather than reading the story. And these elements are real. Passover's real. We have this, all the preparation. I did like the points where they're talking about the points within the Passover, that the lamb is found and they have to pick it out. And then they got to bring it into the house and they got to take care of it for 4 days. So it becomes a part, especially if you have kids in the house. I get if you're adults, and even in the original Passover, the first one, not the remembrances. They said if you had too small a house, like just an older couple, say mom and dad, like you guys, and they'd say, hey, there's too much there, then go to another home and eat with them, stay in their home and eat with them so everything gets eaten, And they talk about this down further in the remembrance. They echo that same deal to make sure that all the food's eaten because that's important in parts of this. And all those elements are played out. One of those is those 4 days that this lamb is brought into the house and it's cared for.
Mm-hmm.
And then
It's sacrificed. Yeah.
there you
And
go.
that-
Right. Now,
that-
the purpose for the sacrifice was what?
Love it, hug it, kiss it,
Yep.
slit its throat.
Yep.
Lovely.
But
Just
when it
for-
does, and the blood is shed, and it has to, and that's all part and parcel to this, is that what did it stop in the Passover?
yeah.
What did it stop? Death.
It stopped death.
That's it. There was no sin involved in this because you could have had an Egyptian in your house.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't even the point, because don't forget, we don't have all the other stuff yet, right? This is on the very first instance. Sacrifices aren't there. All that stuff isn't there. This particular element, this little part of the story, doesn't have any of that yet. We're not there. Okay? And everything we see past that is, he says, remember this moment. Do not forget this moment. It's important that you continue to do this throughout your days, because what happened here is important. The Passover of death. Now, Albite, that's one of your points that you bring up is a good one. I think we have blurred it.
Yeah.
But
And Dallas has been consistent in, when he tells the story, there's margin for it not necessarily being 100% accurate. Kind of thing.
And he's going to take the theological, I'll use the word bias only because we all have one. That's not fair to say his is different than mine, but the same way. But he brings his theological bias into it, and we understand. It's just fair to bring up their varying ways to sometimes peek at some of these things. But yes, he's been very consistent on his position points with these, which I like, because there's more on that discussion around the table, and good stuff. It was fun. And remembering too, guys, and because you're going to talk about this, that this is an amalgam story. In other words, you have something that didn't happen, plus something that did happen, plus something that did happen but didn't happen when that happened. So to be fair, we've got another one of those mixed scenes.
Well, and it was, you mentioned it. It was fun to see him with, in the beginning story, with the bridle. And I immediately went back to, was that season 2 or was that season 1? What episode was that one? I remember that, and go, oh. And I remember that there was reference to its historical connection, but I don't think I tied it in specifically that this was David's bridle, but it makes sense because obviously line of David all the way down, handed down kind of thing. And I was like, oh, that was so cool. That was fun for him to do that kind of a tie-in.
Yeah.
But again, bringing it back to the personal, there was something about, Dad, you talked about, you got the lamb in the home, and the kids are it's like a pet. They love it. And then all of a sudden they have to lose it, and then we tie it into Jesus. There's personal connection to what he's about to do in Jerusalem, and he knows where he's heading. And that bridle, it's like, wow, what a, there's something else I thought of today driving home from work, and I'll save this for either later in the episode or next time we meet, with regard to that whole triumphal entry, thing at the end. So
let's keep that for the last episode or the deal. But yes, no, your points. It'll be a fun one to talk about for sure.
Yeah. You guys are bringing all this stuff in about what Dallas is and isn't doing. I thought that the little conversation with Atticus and Pilate on the thing, I thought that was interesting. They're talking at the end. Atticus says, well, he did some, and Pilate's going, he did. And, that was, of course, conjecture on Dallas's part. But it was, again, we're setting the stage, or Dallas, I'm sorry, is setting the stage for what's going to happen. Yeah. And all of these things could have gone on if there was a Pilate, definitely. I don't know about an Atticus, but there was definitely a Pilate. And they're working through things that they just don't understand. And Pilate's a the picture that Dallas is painting, he's a bit out in left field more than the scripture that I have read about him, where I thought, I just thought he was in the know. He was one of the boys, but it sounds like he's kind of, oh, that happened? Well, that happened? And he wants to make a good impression because his job is predicated on what's going on when I was working in the prisons, and they said that anything you do, if it's something that keeps the yard peaceful, that's what they want. And
Touché.
wheelchairs was one of the things that brought peace. And so they were happy, the ones that could afford doing that. And that's what these guys are saying. Are the Jews being good? Are they paying attention? Or who's in control? And on and on and on. But I thought that conversation they had had a little more depth to it than just passing it by.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's everything in that time, because you go back with secular history and find out that what you just said is the key point.
Yeah.
They want peace. Okay. And what's built up before this point was a bunch of not good things. Now, remember, I could say how many seasons ago, but we have this point in the story within these 3 years that they've had John the Immerser, we call him John the Baptist, has had his head cut off. And those are peace disruptors. And that family and those things that have happened are not on good terms. So there's a history leading up to Jesus. Don't forget, that Herod is directly related to the Herod that slaughtered all children under 2. He pulled a Pharaoh, right? And he pulled an Egyptian Pharaoh and said, kill him. Okay? Not peaceful, right? So there's a lot going on. And what are they willing to do? What are they willing to do, Dad? Your point's clear, for peace. Okay? And his point there is, at this point back with Jesus was kill all the kids. Now you get to this point, and Jimmy, now we're talking about, okay, so what are they willing to do to keep the peace? And I'll say there's two sides. Rome just wants peace. They could care less who their religious guys are. They could literally care less.
And taxes, peace and taxes.
Exactly. As long as it doesn't disrupt money flow.
Right.
And we don't have a lot of problems. And the Passover deal is something they've run every year. Rome knows they do this. This is part of the point. The Feast of Tabernacles was when they hit them with a census, when they grab them. That's an easy time to count people. Yeah.
Right.
So those kind of things happen. That's when Jesus was born. That was that time frame, using the exact same event where they're saying everybody's going to be here, But what are they willing to do this? And we saw them start to scheme there, right? Because various expectations. King. And that's a scary word to throw around.
There was, and it's interesting because looking at the religious leaders and their debates and trying to figure out what to do with Jesus, similar things. I mean, Rome wants peace, but I think the Jews want to keep the peace so that they don't get in trouble with the Romans also.
Fair.
But they're also dealing with this person who could disrupt their peace.
Right.
And so they might have to do something that might cause unrest, but they're trying to figure out how do we keep this as peaceful of a killing as possible, I guess is what they were debating.
They all thought he was supposed to be a king, and a king meant only one guy in charge, right? So there had to be a fight. Everybody is acting on the predication, and to do this in the story, and this is in the real story, not even Dallas Jenkins' story, it's in the real story. They're all predicated on this, and yet Jesus continued to say, that's not what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Again and again, but nobody listened.
Right.
Yeah. And we're sitting here today, post that. We know it. Yeah, but then, it's scary back then. Yeah, because it was predicated on all of that, and yet their worst fears never played out. It wasn't like after Jesus died, there was,
Dad, what were you going to say?
Well, they were talking about the Pharisees were talking about Rome. They want Rome to kill him. So because they don't want to, like you guys are talking about, they don't want to muddy the waters. They want them to get ticked off at him and them kill him, and then they won't. What they think the backwash, they won't get that.
Right.
The Jews won't have that happen.
Yeah.
And again, as we have said often, there are Jews all over the place on this. You got a small group that are pushing for it, and you got others that are like, do we need to go this far? And then you've got like Yusuf? No, he's way over to the other side. So you've got a group, but the key players, the honchos, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, let's say, in power, are all in. When Shmuel at the table, when they're talking, he says, you're doing something. And it reminds me of your grandmother when I started going to the Baptist church, and she was a born again Catholic.
Yeah.
And even though I think in my heart of hearts that she was saved, you'd get to a point and she, don't go there. That's holy ground you're stepping on. And don't talk about the priests, don't talk about the Pope, especially the Pope. But any of the guys, it's the same thing those guys were saying there, that you are messing with us. Our power, our prestige, our money, our and it's becoming quite, to me, as we get closer to it, everybody's stirring the pot. And Jesus knows what's going to happen. And he's not, he doesn't want to do it. He asked his father, hey, can we give this to somebody else? But he knows what's going to happen. And the disciples are still, like you guys said, they still want to make him king. And as we saw with Judas and the whole story. So
it is interesting. It was very evident here, and I don't think about it often, that the Jewish people were looking for a Messiah who would come and overthrow, the oppressors. The Jewish leaders don't seem to have the same strong desire for it. It's like, and I'm thinking, why not? And part of it is, obviously, there's a system in place and it's working. They've got their power and their position and probably their money too. And so why disrupt the status quo with something that could change everything, and then they wouldn't be in the same place that they are? So they have a vested interest in keeping everything status quo. And I hadn't really thought about that.
Tolkien had a storyline on that, if I'm not mistaken, with Denethor on the throne, right? And what's he? The caretaker, right? He's the caretaker. It's for the king to take. And one of the subplots in that storyline with Aragorn is that Gondor, when Boromir and Aragorn first meet at the council, right? And he goes, Gondor has no king.
Right.
Gondor needs no king. And Jimmy, I agree with you there a bit, and even more so. So let me go with a direction that I liked where you went with this. The leaders didn't want to do that. Because yes, I think there were some that really weren't convinced that he was the Messiah. There's a lot you got to give up in that. You have the Pharisees and the Sadducees with resurrection. This is thrown into the mix, and that alienates the Sadducees because it challenges a tenet of being a Sadducee. That's why post this, what we have rabbinically speaking is Pharisaic, because the Pharisees won, in that side of the equation. We get it, okay? But back then, that's a very adamant point. And as far as parties in charge, Caiaphas is not of the line of Aaron. So we have a guy in charge. It's not like there were kings that were kings and there were bad kings and good kings and that kind of stuff. There were probably good line of Aaron guys and guys that probably weren't so good, although technically if you didn't follow the instructions on that with going into the holies and all that kind of stuff, death was often a consequence of that. But Caiaphas is not of the line of Aaron, so he's in it for the money. He's in it by appointment. He's been given the task. And the Jews, the power people of the day, because I want to be careful, Jimmy, because you made the point very clear, is that they're not everybody, to say the word the Jews, is that throwing everybody in the mix. And that is such a disservice. It's so unjust, it isn't even fair. So to say that, like you were saying, the leaders of that time and those in power, Dad, you were saying the top 6, right? It's that's a great deal. That group doesn't want to give up their power. They're very comfortable in that, and they don't want. And they know what happens when Rome comes in. They've seen, they remember the Maccabean revolt and the crush. They remember the success. They remember the backlash, right? Cheat to the story ahead. The whole reason the Second Temple gets destroyed is a revolt. The Jewish zealots revolt, again, trying to push Rome out, right? They're trying to be that, we'll show them, we'll push you out for God. And Rome, and God's like, I'm not behind that, but we're going to use it, because then Rome comes in and does exactly what Jesus said was going to happen. There's not a stone will be standing on that Temple Mount, because they're going, this is what people are rallying around.
Yeah.
So let's just take it off the table. Caiaphas here, Dad, you're right, is exactly that point. He shouldn't even be there. And he's making this. And now he's made his play, yeah? And he's going to involve Pilate and his deal. And where Pilate just wants peace. Pilate just wants no trouble, so he can just live his comfortable life as a governor in the area. That's all he wants. Don't give me any trouble. I'm comfy, and the washing of hands later on, we're well down. We don't want to get there yet, but
I thought Caiaphas was going back to what you said. He made it obvious.
Yeah.
This is a power thing, folks.
Yeah.
And and all the guys who were the key players were all in favor. He didn't have to say it. They were 100% with him on it, because that meant that they were going to keep their power. They're all going to come in together as one voice, so to speak. And boy, when you mess with somebody's power, we've all seen it in the jobs we've had over the years, including when I had my salons and somebody tried to overtake us, and my little Italian partner they to come in and call Uncle Luigi to come in and that when you mess with somebody's power, no matter what the power is, and that's what they see. They see that Jesus is going to take away their power, and they ain't going to let that happen.
Well, and they think it. In other words, the weird part is they think it, and so we'll use the term they believe it, right? Is that fair? So, But the people around the table, they're mixed,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
What the strange part is, they're fearing what the people around the table want, and is echoed around the area. And it's, if you were to take a Gallup poll at that time and said who believes, and remember, let's, before we start pointing fingers at people, that this is the Messiah we're supposedly waiting for. Okay, so let's not be pointing any fingers at anybody with this. But you take point and say, what do you expect the Messiah to be? The answer is he's coming to free us.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the predominant deal. That the understanding of, Dad, your term was, and what Jesus's position, his position this entire time, while all this is spinning around him, he keeps pushing the humble part. He keeps saying it. He keeps bringing it down. And I liked that. And it made them uncomfortable. Shmuel didn't like it. It made them uncomfortable, to the point where Judas is going, how can you be humble and be king? Judas doesn't see the match. And so he fumes so hard. What? He walks out.
Yeah.
To get air. This is beyond his deal, because he expects that. The oil was there was a good sub argument in there.
Yeah.
What did you think of that? Just as we wrap this up, we got a couple of minutes. So that's a very side story on this. But what did you think of that little conundrum that they brought up? Was that, you're like,
And is it my turn to talk?
Yeah,
Sure.
go. Start it.
Because I thought about that when she came in and the different reactions to what she did.
Mm-hmm.
But the humble part, do you wash the king's feet? Well, sure you do. You would wash a king's feet. What she did, and the expensive, what there was, the money was not even involved in her head. And she didn't know that she was cleaning him for his burial.
Yeah.
She thought that she was just stating the fact that you're this precious to us. You brought back her brother, who it meant a lot to, that to the two sisters. So there was a whole lot going on in that, and everybody took it down their road.
Yeah.
Just took it down his road. Shmuel took it down his road. Jesus took it down his road. So that was really interesting to me. Jim,
Yeah, I didn't wait, Jimmy, hold a second. I didn't expect this to be a divisive moment.
Right.
That was a unique storyteller's twist that I kind of enjoy. I appreciate. Let's say enjoy isn't the word. I appreciate from a writing standpoint how you make the anointing of Jesus' feet and the washing a contentious point.
Well, we know from Scripture there was question with regard to the value of the anointing oil.
Yeah.
So we had that part of it. And obviously when Judas said, this could have been sold and given to the poor, kind of thing. It wasn't just, we could use this to advance the kingdom, although that could have been it as well. There's more practical uses for those monies, even though it wasn't Jesus's money. This was Mary's money. Mary took her own money and went and did this.
Right.
And
Fair.
this could have been the insurance money from when Lazarus died. Who knows where it came from, but it was a year's worth of wages.
Yeah.
I love when she told the woman, take the rest of the year off,
that was good.
But what I loved was Mary was completely undeterred in her worship. in what she was doing. And like, I love what you said, Dad, her expression of joy because of what Jesus did, but also reverence for who Jesus was. Cause she said, this is for the most important king ever. She recognized that.
Right.
And so we got to see that. And I've always it's been a little awkward to me to think, why would a woman use her hair to wipe the feet of another man? It does seem a little odd to me. But Jesus received it completely for what it was.
For the way she was expressing it. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, which shows me he saw in it nothing inappropriate. Right. He saw in it nothing that would convey that there was anything other than pure, reverence, kind of thing. Right. And in that regard, then I go, okay, Jim, if Jesus didn't have a problem with it, I don't have a problem with it. Yeah. I'm good to go. Yeah. Not that I would probably go wipe my hair on somebody's feet or something, but it was a beautiful moment, and I loved the way it played out. And like you said, there was tension on. Everybody saw it differently, and how they interpreted it. Yeah. And nobody that I remember saw it for what Jesus saw. Mm-mm. Not any of the disciples, not even his mom. I don't remember anybody's reaction that went, tried to defend
was
it.
The closest. We saw Mary had the look from Lazarus's burial prep. I think Mary had the closest reaction possibly. But I agree with your point that Lazarus echoes it. I don't think it's sunk in, but Lazarus voices a thought. Right? The words escape his lips. That throws it on the table, right? It's now in the open for discussion because it's been spoken. And it's there's a lot going on that they wrote into this that is an amalgam of the set of stories that basically get us to this point anyways. I don't believe they've taken us anywhere that we've never had to deal with or wouldn't have to deal with. I think these are very valid, important points in this as this story progresses. That there are points on these, and I love what they bring, and I love that they continue to show that, Jimmy, like you said, nobody's getting it. We have guesses based on facial expression that somebody's getting it, but the reality is, truthfully, in the story that we're reading, no. They didn't get it. They didn't. And I understand why. I totally understand why. And we'll get in the next one. We'll talk about traditions tied to this and other things that I think are very important to talk about too, because that's not a bad word. Tradition is not a bad word. Because if we think it is, when you use it in scripture, then we're being hypocrites. Yeah. Because we use them in our daily lives. So that's not fair. Yep. Or we're just fooling ourselves. We're playing a Styx song. Is it Styx? Fooling yourself, you don't believe it? Killing yourself? I don't know. Anyways, okay. Those they'll say something. Any last notes?
No, I think we're good. We obviously have more to talk about, so we're going to go into episode 2 or part 2 of our episode.
Yeah. Daddy-O, anything?
No, I'm good. I just what Jim said.
Okay. So, folks, thanks for being with us tonight. Spirited conversation. I do expect pushback, meaning that these are meant to spur conversation amongst yourselves. You heard us talk about it. Talk about it amongst yourselves. All of the episodes that we have, not only on The Chosen, but on everything else, we have topics on TheDustyFeet.com. That's their purpose, to spur discussion, to get you to, as I like, coffee and donuts, sit around, talk amongst yourselves. If you have any questions or concerns, you're free to email bob@TheDustyFeet.com or pop it down in the comments. We'll gladly respond to them. And if you have any good ones, we'll be sure to bring it up, post it to ourselves. That means post it up and talk about it. So, Dad, bro, thanks for being here tonight. Folks, thanks for hanging with us and being with us for another episode of Sons of the Father on the Dusty Feet.
Bye.